Hello and welcome back to Bespoke Unit. Today we're going to be talking about one of the USA's most iconic fragrances, Pinaud Clubman. An aftershave lotion that's been with us around since... Well, that's a good question actually. When was it established? Now, Pinaud Clubman used to put on their bottles 1810. Well, in actual fact, Edouard Pinaud, the founder, was born in France around 1810. And in fact, he didn't start his business until he was 20 years old, so 1830. Nevertheless, he did buy a distillery in France that was founded in 1810. So you could say that it was an exaggeration, but there was some truth in it. Now, Clubman hasn't been around that long either. In fact, the information out there is sketchy, but I did a little digging, and I found that when Pinaud moved to the USA, now Edouard Pinaud died in 1868, but his partner's son-in-law continued the business. They moved to New York in around 1902. Although they did export to the USA, who were one of their biggest clients, for a number of years. Now, even once they'd established themselves in the United States, the Clubman line hadn't been released. In fact, it wasn't released until probably during the 1940s. So, while it is true, Pinaud has got a very, very impressive heritage, it's not quite as impressive as they make it out to be. Nevertheless, that doesn't really change anything with regards to our review. So, if you want to learn a bit more about Pinaud's history, don't hesitate to head to Bespoke Unit, check the link in the description and you can read more about it. As with every fragrance review that we do, we use the Bespoke Unit fragrance formula. This was a model that was put together by Paul Anthony back in 2013, improved upon in 2016 and then released in 2017. It's an impartial system that aims to evaluate a fragrance as a whole and then gives it a score out of 100. You can too also review your own fragrances. Just check the link in the description to download a blank version to use at home, and actually we'd really be interested to hear your thoughts, give it a try, and even send us a copy via our email address in our contact details on the site of Bespoke Unit. Now let's begin with trying this on. Now it's an aftershave, so expect a very alcohol heavy head. It also doesn't come with an atomizer. So let's be very careful in applying it. Let's not rub it in too hard either. Let's not break down the head. Here we go. Let's let the alcohol just cook away for a second. But before the head evaporates, let's give it a sniff. So first things first is a citrus burst of bergamot and lime. Probably some oranges in there too. As well as a couple of aromatics, notably a bit of rosemary, I'm guessing, and spearmint. The spearmint adds a touch of freshness, while the rosemary gives this sort of rounded, fresh flavour. A bit of green. Now as we move into the head, we discover a little floral note of geranium, a little bit of lavender as well, so that's aromatic but at the same time somewhat floral, quite sweet. There's some dry, earthy pepper in there. It's a bit spicy, adds to the structure, and as well, Virginia tobacco, or tobacco in general. I like to say it's Virginia because it's a little bit blonde, it's a little bit light, it's not as heavy as a Balkan blend or Cavendish. I'm just going to use some coffee grains and let that reset for a while. Before we get to the base, let's quickly talk about the seasonality of the fragrance. Now, given that it's quite a well-rounded fragrance, it's got a lot of things going on in there. It's a very good all-year-round fragrance, which, because of the aromatic notes that I mentioned earlier, performs slightly better during the spring. Now going back to the composition, I'm getting, I'd say some tonka bean, coumarin, and amber, as well as some moist oak moss. Now the dryness of the coumarin and the amber kind of reminds me of leather, but I'd say they're too separate to be considered as a single leather note. Then at the end we have quite a gourmand vanilla finish that's quite long and drawn out. So as you may have gathered by what I just mentioned, it's an aromatic fougère, which means that it consists of lavender and geranium somewhere in the heart, sometimes a relatively citrusy head, lots of aromatics in there all the way through, and the base may consist of oak moss and musk. So let's talk about the fragrance's awakened strength. Now, it's an aftershave, so don't expect an extreme performance either way. It's quite high in the alcohol content and quite low in the essential oils. Nevertheless, even though the sillage is poor to non-existent and projection is average at best, the longevity is quite impressive. You can put this on and expect it to last for about 4 or 5 hours. So that's until the late morning, lunchtime, if you put it on first thing in the morning when you're leaving for work. Now in terms of third-party feedback, it's quite interesting in the sense that there are two very polarizing camps. There's the side that says this is great, absolutely love it. It's got this very overt barbershop vibe, very old school. It's very bracing experience when you wear it, and yet you have the other side that considers it to be very synthetic, very cheap, very plasticky. There is some truth behind that. In the 90s, Clubman underwent a huge overhaul when the owners decided to go for plastic bottles. Now, glass being a more expensive material, somewhere it made sense. However, plastic is porous. It absorbs and it disintegrates under ultraviolet light, which means that the contents had to be changed to compensate for this. So let's talk about the fragrance's impressions. By that I mean wearability and versatility. Let's start with asking ourselves, from what age could you start wearing Pinaud Clubman? Now, unlike, for example, Old Spice, which is multi-generational, it's been with us since 1938 and can be worn by just about any age, from, for example, a young man to an old man, and still feel quite fitting, Pinaud Clubman would feel somewhat out of place on a younger man. It would be somewhat stuffy. You see, Pinaud Clubman is quite static. It's set in a fixed point in time, whereas Old Spice has been able to traverse across the generations. Therefore, this is better for someone who's above their 30s and at a push, maybe late 20s. However, Pinaud Clubman performs best during the daytime. At night, it would feel out of place, is lacking that character of a night fragrance. For occasions, now, it's not too casual, but it's definitely not formal. It's not formal because it's lacking that level of refinement. It is a very appropriate workplace fragrance. You can wear this at the office. It is not overpowering neither, so you don't have the risk of, when you're working in a very closed environment, wrinkling any noses. You can wear this before you leave the house to go to work, and it will probably fade quite well throughout the day without causing any discomfort. With regards to the fragrance's masculinity, where does this leave us? Well, we would best consider this as a strong, very masculine fragrance. It's very musky, lots of amber, very powdery, and it contains a number of aromatic notes. This is not a faint nor a moderate fragrance in terms of masculinity. It is very out there, and it is quite a statement in that sense. Also, given that it is from the 40s and references to earlier fragrances, it contains those particularly characteristic traits of a manly fragrance. However, what sets Pinaud Clubman apart, and the reason it has scored so well in impressions, is the fact that it can be paired with another fragrance. That is to say that during your shaving routine, you splash this on afterwards, so you've got a nice bracing finish, and then you can wear your daytime fragrance with it. Thing is, you just have to be careful and pick something with corresponding notes, and then they work together, they emphasize one another, and they actually encourage one another. Pinaud will not last as long, of course, being an aftershave, and as that dries away and they dry down together, the daytime fragrance will take its place, and take its place quite well. Just be careful when choosing the right fragrance to do this, but it can be very effective and can actually prolong your daytime fragrance and even give it a new nuance as well. Finally, Pinaud Clubman's presentation. Needless to say, it's somewhat disappointing for the fragrance to come in a plastic bottle. Not only is it not doing the fragrance any favours, even though they have reformulated it to compensate for this, it's visually unappealing, it's not very pleasant to the touch, and it lacks that quality that you'd expect from a fragrance, especially a traditional one with such a heritage. The label is, well, it has all the ingredients. It has Ed Pinaud mentioned twice, it has Clubman, it has aftershave lotion. We're not quite sure what is the brand nor the name of the product, although now we have already established this. There's the iconic figure with a cane and a top hat, which is a pleasure to see. All the ingredients are there, but the execution lacks the panache that you would want from such a classic fragrance. In terms of cardboard packaging, there is none, it comes only in this. Given that it's plastic, this isn't a big deal. If it were glass, this would be more of an issue. Nevertheless, when it comes to giving this as a gift or protecting it, there's nothing there. So if you're gift wrapping it, you're gonna have some fun. In terms of atomizer, as you know, there is none. It's just a splash bottle. This isn't too bad because it's plastic. You can give it a squeeze and you can deliver just the right amount of fragrance into your hand rather than tip it, pour it and have a puddle in your hand instead. The value for money of Pinaud Clubman is nothing short of impressive. Actually, it almost makes up for the fact that it comes in a plastic bottle because it somewhat justifies it. If you check the description, you'll see on Amazon that it's available at almost $1 an ounce. In fact, bottles of $12 can be picked up for $12.70. Again, check the link in the description and it'll take you right to it. To conclude, if you've been looking for the quintessential barbershop fragrance, look no further than Pinaud Clubman. Although it may have its shortcomings and come off as slightly cheap, it makes up for this in abundance by providing an authentic barbershop experience. It has a great dry, powdery dry down and is a real pleasure to splash on and feel that bracing sensation. Of course, aftershave might not be your thing. You might have a beard, like myself, currently. Or you may not enjoy the burn of alcohol. Nevertheless, it makes for an excellent cologne as well that can complement your daytime fragrances. If you enjoyed this video and would like to read more on Pinaud Clubman, don't hesitate to look into the description and see the full written review. Furthermore, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see us again, don't hesitate to hit subscribe. Of course, Bespoke Unit doesn't just do videos and doesn't just do videos on fragrances. Head to our site to learn more about men's lifestyle. And of course, like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. And I look forward to seeing you soon. My name's Charles Philippe Bowles. Take care.